Alrighty there. I had so much fun talking about runes and grapheme clusters and symbols last time that I just couldn't help myself and decided we need to talk about functions. Okay, so these are the things that do things in Dart, the functions. Okay, this is the Dart language tour, annotated docs. Looks like we've got functions, parameters, main, first class objects, so forth and so on. Yeah, I think we'll just be doing this top level function overview before we go into these other subjects at a later time. Okay, Dart is a true object-oriented language. I don't know what else to say about that. I've never seen like false or faux object-oriented languages or what those would look like. Or maybe there's some that are just object-oriented in name only. OENOs they might call them, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, so apparently it's a true object-oriented language. In my mind, that means like everything's an object, kind of like Ruby. So I think because I'm most familiar with everything is an object in Ruby, I tend to think that they're kind of the same in that regard. So the only thing that means to me is like I can transfer my understanding of objects in Ruby and kind of apply them in Dart. Yeah. So even functions are objects and have a type, function type. There you go. This means that functions can be assigned to variables, okay, and then you can pass them around, pass them as arguments to other functions. You can also call an instance of a Dart class as if it were a function, a callable class, okay? I want to save this last little demonstration for the end of this, so hopefully I don't forget, but it's kind of cool. Okay. Let's just jump in and look at what a function is. Let's copy this first example. I'm going to paste it outside of main. You may be able to do it inside. Oh yeah. So we've got this private variable here called noble gases. If you remember from the maps section, they have a thing called noble gases. So let's just go steal that. Okay. Hello. All right, there's that, but it's private variable, so we're going to use it like so. Again, I don't think it matters the order that these are defined in. Okay, let's go back. Oops, not that one. I think I don't know what I pressed. Yep, back to functions, thank you. Okay, we should have everything we need. All right, so this is great. The thing we're learning about here is the thing at the top. It uses this variable called noble gases, and just to make some people happy. Sometimes it makes more sense to define this up here. So this is a map. It has key value pairs. There's the number from the periodic table, and there's the noble gas that's associated with it. Okay, there's just 3. I think there's actually more noble gases, but that's all we got here for now. Now, our function here is broken down in a couple of ways. Here's the return type. It's a Boolean. We're expecting it to return true or false. Here's the name. It could be named anything, but the convention when something is returning a Boolean is the is noble or like has some property. In Ruby, we would just have noble, like we would have def noble, and that would be a method, you know, and we would have some code in there like that. But we don't have that type of predicate method question mark in Dart, so we have to use the word is in front. Is it noble? Yes or no. True or false. This is a positional argument. This is what's passed in between these parentheses. If you didn't have this here, you wouldn't pass a variable, it would just do something, okay? But right now you have, it passes in an atomic number, and it's expecting that to be an integer, which is one of these guys over here. I think you might be able to get rid of that type and it would still work. But this is a good verbose way to specify everything. Okay, and then you have these opening and closing curly braces on line 7 and 9. And everything in between here is the function body. This is what is actually executed or ran. So here's the logic. It's an expression evaluating something on the left and something on the right. Are they not equal? And then you have a return value. So kind of like how semicolons are really required in a lot of places in Dart, whereas like in JavaScript they're not. In Dart, you typically have to have this return value. If I got rid of it, the analyzer might not like that. Yeah, the body might complete normally, causing null to be returned, but the return type is potentially non-nullable type. Okay, so that's what this is. Now we can, everything's defined. We have the specific return thing. This is what we're returning as the result of this expression. But to call is noble, like how it's used in the wild, you would say, and let's say we just want to print that, what is returned, that true or false value, we can say is noble. Actually, we need to wrap it in print. Oops, like so. Now we're going to call, let's just get some space for readability, is noble. Now if it didn't take parameters, it would just be called like that. But it takes an argument, okay? Too few positional arguments. 1 is required, 0 were given. Okay, so we need to pass something. So like the number 2, it's expecting an integer like that. Okay, it's going to go look up that thing. It's going to get helium. Helium is not null, so it's going to return true. And that's what we get there. If we try 3, which is what? I forget. It's not sodium. That's false because the periodic atomic number 3 is not a noble gas. Okay. All right, that's how it's called in the wild. Yeah, another way you could do this is you could assign this to a variable. I don't know that you can actually, maybe you could do this since it's here. You could call that function and assign it to a variable by the same name and then reference that variable here. Let's see what it says. Local variable is noble can't be referenced before it is declared. Okay, so I think it thought it was referencing itself. The name is noble is already defined. Okay, so we can't quite do that. Has nobility. There you go. Nobility. Okay, so that's going to execute and store this return type in that variable, and we're going to print it. Pretty basic stuff, but if you're new, hey, it's hopefully it will become basic. But right now it may be novel. Okay, so that is the gist of a function in Dart. This next part, it says, although effective Dart recommends, now when it says effective Dart, that is this section here in the language area, where it talks about style and usage and design and all that good stuff. They recommend type annotations, which is this bool thing here. You see how they've removed it. The function still works if you omit the types. So it's going to know, like, Dart under the hood knows that this expression, no matter what's on the left or the right, is going to return true or false, assuming some error doesn't happen. So you can omit that, and it's still going to run just fine. Okay. Okie dokie. That is all that is saying. I want to say one more thing though. So up here it said functions are objects and have a type function with a capital F. if you do this, you're saying that it's returning a function. So this function, even though it's the type of this thing here, what you give here at the beginning is really denoting the return type. Okay, so don't get tripped up by that. Okay, it's just the wrong return type. Okay, we'll get back to that later. Okay, next part. For functions that contain just one expression, you can use a shorthand syntax. Sometimes, because of the equal sign versus a single dash, it'll be called the fat arrow or just the arrow syntax that they have here versus skinny arrow or fat arrow. And this is how we're going to do that. We're going to put it on one line. So let's do that now. You don't have to have these functions on multiple lines. This is still valid Dart. You have this between your curly braces, okay? So that's your block of code that gets executed when you call isNoble and pass it an atomic number, an integer. Now, it's still kind of a mouthful, so we can get rid of these curly braces and this return thing and put equal this thing right here. So that is the arrow syntax. Sometimes it's called, you'll hear it called fat arrow. That would be like a skinny arrow, but they're just calling it arrow syntax. So we'll just call it arrow syntax from now on. Okay, and that's it. That way you can have stuff in your code that takes up one line instead of three. It's a lot easier to read and not get overwhelmed by all the things that you're doing. Okay, and that's what we just showed. The expression and the semicolon actually remained. Could I remove the semicolon? So technically, that semicolon here also needs to be here. Okie doke. And that single space, yeah, I guess so. All right. Arrow syntax. All right, the last bit before we go to parameters, which is going to be in another video. Only an expression, not a statement, can appear between the arrow and the semicolon. For example, you can put an if statement. You can't put an if statement, but you can use a conditional expression, also known as a ternary. Okay, let's do a really trite example. Bool. It's not going to take any arguments. We're going to say is true. All right, so if it's true, then return true. Else, excuse me, else false. Print is true. Okay. Now watch. If I don't put the little parentheses to actually call the function, I'm just passing around a reference to it. Okay, what is going on here? I need to return true. I think I do. And I think I need a semicolon. Okay, so I think that's what it's telling me. Okay, even though this, these other lines will never be reached because this is hard-coded true. Like I said, it's a trite example. What I'm showing here is if you don't invoke or call the method, you're just passing around a reference. So you can kind of think of this as a little bit of like a variable. It holds this package of code and you can pass it to this print statement and it returns a closure. Okay, so you'll see that word, a closure. Now I can call it like that. Okay, so now it's printing true because it's actually executing this code inside here. Do you want to say call? Yeah, check that out. But what does that actually do? Does it return true? Yeah. Okay, so I'm doing that because I kind of want to show you something here in a second. Okay, so that is true. What I'm demonstrating here, though, is the this part where it says you can't put an if statement, but you can use a conditional expression, which I think in JavaScript is like the ternary operator. So let's just make this one line without replacing anything yet. Okay, so it should still be valid if I put it all on one line. This should be valid Dart. Here's my opening and closing curly braces in red. Then everything in here is the expression. Okay, now this, if we, you see how we don't have like the return that we had before from this one whenever we were refactoring that. So you can't just replace that and do the arrow syntax. If you tried and got rid of that, you get a bunch of errors. It doesn't really parse the input that well. Even if you kept a semicolon on the outside, I don't think it does it, right? So instead, you have to use the ternary syntax or the conditional expression, not a statement. So if true, question mark, we can either say return true or just true, else return false or just false, like that. Okay, so that is your conditional expression. We'll change this to false is false, so it should return false, expected to find that. Okay. There we go. If we change this back to true, then this first part is reachable, the second part is not. Okay, and we get that little error message about dead code. Okay, and it prints true there. All right, so that is your conditional expression in one line. I did mention I wanted to do this callable class thing. So it says you can call an instance of a Dart class. Now we haven't gone over classes yet, but the instance of a Dart class as if it were a function. All right, let me show you what that means. Let's clear out everything. Let's create a class, dog, curly braces. If we say dog equals new dog, okay, I'm just using the old syntax. All right, so this is the instance of this dog class. And I say dog dot call. Okay, call hasn't been defined. Remember earlier in that last example, I did a thing where I actually called the function instead of just using the invocation like that. Okay, if you do something like this, you see how I get the same error message when I try to treat this instance like a function. It says the method call isn't defined. So this is sort of an implicit dot call by invoking it like that. Now, what I can do is define, let's say that when we call the dog, we're going to define this call function, right? And let's just return a string. I'm a dog. Like that. Okay, so now we have an instance of a dog and we can kind of treat it like a function. Okay. We don't need return. Dirt. Run it again. Okay. Now let's print that. Wrap it in a print. I don't think we need that now. Okay, it prints I'm a dog by just running this part right here, okay, which is the same thing as call. All right, yeah, it finished it and showed it. So that is when it says you can also call an instance of a Dart class as if it were a function. Callable classes, and that's covered later. Okay, that is it for the top level of functions. Next time we will go into parameters. All right, see you next time.